Hi and welcome to another Train Shed Tuesday. I'm going to talk about a few things today. I'm going to talk about this layout. I'm going to talk about the Costa model railways. We're going to talk a little bit about PWM controllers. I've got some artwork to show you. I've got Doug's layout to show you with some really clever lights and clever features. So quite a bit to talk about today. So this is the one I started doing for the challenge that I've mentioned that's got a few people interested. So this is on the 60 by 23.5 centimetre floating shelf. And this is, if you like, my first attempt. Those of you that follow me regularly will know that what I've been finding really interesting at exhibitions are very simple layouts of a real sense of space, a real sense of letting the trains breathe. And that's what I wanted to recreate. So I'm really pleased with this layout because I've done that. Normally, I cram loads of stuff in. I'm just going to walk slowly because I know some people dislike me walking quickly. Excuse the junk, I'm sorting out in here. So for instance, this layout, which is one of my favourite ovals, lots going in, lots crammed in, lots going on, both of those. Even the Japanese one, to some degree, is a bit like that. And I realised that the layouts that I'd seen at exhibitions that really got me thinking were, as I say, layouts of lots of space. So this, for me, I'm really taken with this because it's so simple. It's only 1 point. It's a simple tuning fork, and I've been shunting with it. It works fine. I've got a nice little halt there so I can run my tram in. And this is very freelance. So I want to be able to run Japanese stuff, and that halt actually is quite Japanese. Good shed, not quite so much, bit European. Might get away UK, but this is why I like to do generic layouts, so I can run what I like. I've just done a video on some of the construction, so if you haven't seen it, and I will do an update on the construction. But simple static grass using a notch, N-O-C-H, puffer bottle, worked really well. I did end up with scattering static grass all over the track, which actually initially I was a bit annoyed about, but now I really like it because it makes it look, the ballast look more like it's a bit of a rundown end of a line where probably the weed killer train needs to go. And then here I've done the trick I've done before and I've seen done at a few layouts, is rather than having the obvious tunnel mouth, which is where you then get all your height from, I've simply cut as small a hole I can in the back seam and hidden it with a little wood, trees. And from most angles, it works really well. The train just comes out of the trees and comes onto the layout. So that, then while we're talking PWM, so this is our little controller. Doug 3D printed me a flat box in there. And it started a bit of a debate amongst some people about PWM controllers and whether they were suitable for N-gauge. Well, obviously the first thing is, yes, they are, because we run all our N-gauge on these PWM controllers, so not sure where that comes from. And then there was also debates, we run them on 12 volt, they will work on 9, they will work on 5, but the bigger locos won't, but they will run on 12. And then there was a suggestion that they won't work on cordless motors. Well, the problem with that is they're cordless motors, and they run fine on it. And a bit of research on Doug's part, being the electronic degree student, and an interesting comment from somebody who's also done electronics degree, is it isn't PWM controllers. It's PWM controllers with feedback. So it's feedback is the issue, not PWM. And most of the PWM controllers with feedback are quite old controllers. So it's probably not that shocking that very old controllers won't work with state-of-the-art trains. We can't get any evidence that it blows them up or melts them, which is what some people were saying. But it does cause poor running. We've had people actually say that. It's also given us a usual example of what the problem is with things like forums. We were inundated with people telling us what they'd seen on forums and repeating it as fact. As the world is showing at the moment, not everything you see online is fact. And it's a bit like when we did the WD-40 and 3-in-1 oil video, and we said to people, don't comment unless you actually have had this issue. Don't tell us other people have told you. The fact that other people might not have got it right doesn't mean that we're wrong. So it's a bit the same with this. By all means, comment about PWM, but please don't repeat what you've seen on forums. It doesn't mean, please don't take this the wrong way, it doesn't mean you know what you're doing. It means you're repeating somebody else who might not. But if you've genuinely got experience of PWM controllers with feedback on coreless motors, might be quite interesting. Let's see what happens. So I was quite pleased with the back scene. Pico Sky and some scenery cut off a Gauge Master one, which worked quite nicely. The road crossings there are guttering from a building, putting some blocks of plastic, fuel drum there. So yeah, and it all runs really nicely. Let's see if I can just get the tram to run off. So I can run the tram off. And then actually what I built myself here is a little fiddle yard, a little 2-road fiddle yard, so I can run some trams or some different freight in. Now, we've had a few questions about the challenge. It's not a competition. There's no prizes. The idea was simply that I'd seen other people do a challenge, and I thought, well, let's see if we can do it a cheap way. And these floating shelves are very cheap. So I've actually got another one there, and I'm experimenting with 00. Doesn't work as well in 00, but it'll be interesting to see what people can do in 00. The Juf wagon is there because I've got a really nice Roco HO-DB shunter that I might make a layout for. Now, I'm also toying with TT, as I mentioned last time, but that won't be until November, when hopefully the starter set comes out. Interestingly, there is a mistake on the Hornby website. The photograph of the list of parts of the starter set shows a point, an additional straight track, and they don't come with it. I managed to get a reply from a good contact in Hornby just to confirm that. So that's that layout. I was going to talk artwork. That was just a really nice picture somebody sent me. I bought a book online on eBay, second-hand book, and somebody put that postcard in. And then this one, this came from some art that was done. I don't know the artist, but I worked for a company called Moore's Biscuits down in Dorset. It was my last job before I retired. And they did a box of biscuits with this picture on the front, which comes out really nice. One of my favourite locos and a great setting. Now, while we're talking about the challenge, we had some interesting comments about price. Because of my comment about somebody making what was frankly a very ordinary layout and thinking it was good because it only cost them 400 quid. This, by comparison, hasn't cost me 50. It's all second hand, very second hand. A couple of the buildings bought new, but the scatter and the trees and everything were all bought very cheaply. I'd be very surprised if this layout cost me more than 50 quid. But there is a viewpoint which I quite like, is, well, hang on. If you were starting from scratch, you had no tools or paints or anything, then obviously this would be a lot nearer £100. If I'd had to buy a Stanley knife and a saw and a hammer and paints and glue, but of course the problem with that argument is I would still have the tools left over to make other layouts, lots of paint and glue left over to make other layouts. So you'd have to spread that cost, I think, over numerous projects. It is an interesting one. I had somebody take me to task once to say, well, you bought a pack of 6. Can't remember what it was. So the real cost is 6. No, because I only used 2. Going to use the 4 somewhere else. So it's an interesting one, I think. Do you include all total costs? Well, yeah, probably. If you're new to the hobby and you don't have a single tin of paint, a single craft knife, a single ruler, then the total cost of that layout is quite expensive. If you make 2 layouts, it's left. If you make 4 layouts, it's less. If you're already a modeler, well, then you can't really include the costs of glue, paint and tools because they're already in your toolbox. I mean, the Stanley knife I use, I bought nearly 40 years ago. So I think it's an interesting one when it comes to cost. I can see both sides of the argument. The challenge, there is some interest. I'm waiting for Doug to get back to uni next week, and he's going to set me up a website so that people can send me photos and everybody can see them. It's just going to be a simple challenge. What can you build on a floating shelf, 60 by 23.5, using as much second-hand and recycled as you can. What I'm not interested in is somebody going and buying huge amounts of ready-to-plant resin buildings, throwing huge sums of money at it. I'm looking to see what can someone do in any scale or gauge on a relatively small footprint using recycled and second hand. But once we've got the website, I'll publish all the criteria and then you can have a go. And it's simply a place, it's to see if it inspires people to have a go at making a layout. I'm not going to enforce the rules. If you want to make a bigger board, make a bigger board. If it's nice, I might include it. But the trouble is, where do you draw the line? Once I've said, yeah, okay, you can have a bigger board, what's to stop somebody using 2 boards? At which point it becomes a 4 foot by 2 foot layout. So there will be some size criteria. Doesn't mean I'm not interested in something if somebody else does something differently. But that's going to be the criteria. What can you put on a board? I'm really pleased. I really like this idea of letting trains breathe in a layout. And it's only confirmed for me that N is absolutely the way to go. When you look at how cramped a double O will be on the same size, yeah, you can make it work. You can have 4 wagons, you can have a few buildings. N just suddenly becomes so much more interesting. Right, let's go next door. So we're in Doug's cabin, and he came up with this lovely idea, which is a half motorway flyover. So it's a bit like low relief in reverse. There isn't room to put it all, so you got half of it. And he got these vehicles, was it a £5, Doug?
Yep.
For £5. All of those vehicles, not £5 each, £5 for all of those vehicles with lights. eBay? AliExpress from China. So when you're paying £15 for one vehicle in the UK, you might want to think about that. And while we're talking about doing things cheaply, this is Doug's wagons. These are Cemex, what are they called? HOA hoppers. Have a look at them. There's 12 of them there. Now 12 ready-to-run hoppers are going to cost you about 400 quid plus. These are 3D printed and they'll come round again in a minute. And Doug has colour 3 printed them. So he's printed the underframes as one piece in black, but then the bodies, he's printed the bottoms, the blue, changed the filament and continued printing with grey on top. So they're effectively a 2-colour print. And then he's made his own transfers, printed his own transfers, and he's just in the process now of weathering them. Total cost of those, about £100. 40. I'm sorry, I got my maths wrong. 40. Doug corrects me. And that is for the bogies. That's for the bogies. That's all he's done. He's bought bogies from AliExpress again. Yep. And changed them for metal wheels so they run better. Now, we then come back to the discussion we had earlier because, as somebody rightly said, well, it hasn't cost you that because you paid for the printer. Yes, but we've spent 40 instead of 400 and the printer cost...
That specific one cost 300.
300. But you can buy a printer that would do that for 100, 150, at which point you're still quids in. Now, I know not everybody's got 100 quid for a printer. Doug got his for review before somebody says 300 quid for a printer. You can do exactly that on a 100, 150 pound printer. If you've then made 10 wagons, you're still quids in. So I think that's going to be very interesting moving forward, what people will be able to do with 3D printers. That's Doug's excellent bridge there. And what make of loco is that, Doug?
Daypol.
So that's a really good Daypol 66 that Doug paid, I think, about 65 quid for, brand new, discounted. So I'll try and get those wagons. So there we go. Another interesting talking point on the cost. Yes, there is a cost buying the printer, but it's substantially... You would have saved your money just printing 12 wagons. And that's before you print... In fact, Doug's printed container wagons where he's made a similar saving. I've printed... Sorry?
24.
Doug's done 24. I'm going to come over the other side. It's 24 container wagons over there. That's similarly big saving. So 3D printers are going to be a way forward. Now, Doug's very lucky. He can CAD design, but so can a lot of people now. There are designs on the internet. Be careful. Some of them don't work. They're designed by people who know how to design, not how to 3D print. And Doug often finds we have to do substantial work to the files to actually make them print. So there we go. Quite a lot to talk about today. A little bit about cost, some layouts and the challenge. Doug assures me he'll set the website up next couple of weeks. Is that right, Doug?
Sure.
And then we can get that challenge going. And I've got an idea for another challenge. I'll just go back next door and talk about that. So if this challenge goes well, then what I might do probably next year is a second challenge where we pick a modular design like that that's readily available, use Kato tracks so they clip together, set standards of where the track goes, and you could then expand the Kato idea where they do lots of funny little layouts, but we could actually then say, well, if we do that, groups of people could get together and click all the modules together, which is something lots of clubs and societies do. So there we go, lots of ideas. I just love the look of this layout. I know that sounds a bit arrogant, and I'm sorry, but I'm really pleased with it. I set out to do this kind of open, airy look, and that's exactly what I've managed to achieve. So I am quite pleased with that, and I think it's going to change the way I think about some of my model railways. Whereas before I put as many scenes as I can in, there's a lovely idea here of, well, what if you didn't? What if you don't fill it full of track? What if you don't fill it full of buildings? Back scenes, by the way, are just leftover laminate board, so they actually didn't cost me any money either. The station there is foam board and bits of cereal packet card cut up as the planks, and a few Kato figures. So there we go. A lot to listen to today. Wonder how many people we've still got with us. I can't promise there'll be another tutorial Tuesday every Tuesday, although at the moment we are. Hope you've enjoyed today's ramblings, and we'll talk to you again soon.